Noting that it is 7 o'clock, I'll call this meeting of the Community and Economic Development Authority to order. Next item on the agenda is a roll call.
Cleary?
Here.
Fairchild?
Here.
Hamilton?
Here.
Hardy?
Here.
Potts?
Here.
Udell?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. The next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have minutes from the August 25th, 2022 meeting. Those were included in your packet prior to the meeting.
A motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? See none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. Item number 4 is an introduction of our new member. We have Mark Fairchild with us. I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to introduce yourself briefly, and then we can kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Fairchild. I'm very excited to be here this morning at the nice, bright, early hour of 7 a.m. Just to give a very brief background for those of you that were maybe not at the last city council meeting, I have a significant background in multifamily housing and a wide variety of facets with that, from student to tax credit to historic tax credit to conventional, kind of the full range of both development and the operations side of multifamily and some commercial real estate background as well. I've got 2 kids, have lived in Fitchburg since 2013, and we live on the very, very far west side, right over by Hugo Jamestown Park. So I'm excited to be here.
All right, I can go next. I'm Andy Potts. I'm the chair of CETA. I think you actually live across the street from my parents.
I do.
Let's see, you've been a Fitchburg resident since the 70s. I was a former alder, was on city council for 10 years, been on CETA for, I'm not even sure how long at this point. And then in my day job, I'm a manager at the state budget office, work on primarily agriculture, environmental, and criminal justice issues. Want to maybe head this way around?
Jim Wheeler, how you doing, Mark? I'm glad to have you aboard.
Good morning, Randy Udell, council president, resident of Fitchburg since 1998, retired engineer from AT&T, and I think that's enough information for right now. So, welcome aboard. Welcome. Thank you.
I'm actually Scott. I'm your Park Rec and Forestry Director. I've been here for a bit of time, and welcome, and we'll look forward to working with you.
So welcome, I'm Mark Hamilton. I live in Seminole Ridge. I've been a Fitchburg resident since '92, and I'm retired from UW Health. I used to work, I'm also on the Chamber Board of Directors on CETA and with the Fitchburg Bike Committee. So, nice to meet you.
Welcome, I'm Dan Hardy. I'm an attorney in Madison. I've lived in Fitchburg since 1981, and I've been on this committee for a long time.
Since its inception, I think, Dan.
I said a long time.
Yeah. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you again. Mike Z, Economic Development Director, and welcome to CETA.
Joyce Fry, Economic Development Specialist. We're excited to have you here. Probably going to tap you a lot for your expertise in housing, so I've got your number.
And not to be forgotten on the big board, we have Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer Clary. I'm a resident of Fitchburg, and I own and operate an appraisal company in Dane County. And welcome.
All right, yes, again, welcome aboard. So the next item on our agenda is public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't believe we have any slips in. No one is in the audience. Item number 6 is resolutions and ordinances. We have none. Item number 7 is the North Hatchery Road Hub. This is with Scott Endel, who is, as he just mentioned, our Parks, Rec, and Forestry Director.
But I certainly thank CETA for the opportunity to come in and give you an update. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple things. First off, Wade Thompson, who did work in the planning department, but has left the office, and this is really his if I didn't mention that. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't compliment CETA on their vision for this project. As you recall, CETA was the group that provided the initial funding to do the conceptual plans for this project on North Traceway. So I certainly wanted to mention that before I got started. And if you've been following along with the project in the council, we've gone through a couple revisions with the Park Commission and budget items and those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, I did include in your packet some conceptual drawings, some visuals of what the building is going to look like. And if everyone's familiar, it is on the north side of Traceway. There's a vacant property there, which actually we became the City of Fitchburg Parks Department became owners of that property through the parkland dedication ordinances. So that's the parcel that we're working on developing. I would break the project into three different entities, if you would. If you look up into the northeast corner, we have it's an all-wheels type of facility, and just as a bit of information, we did actually work with the designer of the Leopold Park project, the bicycle project there. We wanted to make sure that we didn't duplicate any services or opportunities there. And then if you move towards the south on Traceway, that's really our activity center, if you would. We've got a playground, a plaza, and a large shelter building. I did hand out just right now a floor plan of that building that we could, if you wanted to, go through it. But it basically includes two large meeting rooms to the east. We have a front vestibule and actually the hallway goes through the building north to south. We do have an office in the front, bathroom facilities, and then a bit of a potential concession area to the north. And as if I don't know if you've got the packet online there, but we can kind of roll through the different images of the project. I will note that originally what we did have is a covered hardcourt area for the basketball, but that was removed during the approval process, so we do not have that covered structure to the west. And certainly, if and maybe what I did include in your information also is the process where we're at. We are in currently the schematic design process of the review. So that's currently where we're at. Then we'll go to a more detailed design. Then we'll bid the project, and we're hoping to get the project bid, in February with hopefully an award, and then a groundbreaking, if you would, in April. And we're looking at about a 12 to 13 month construction. So we're looking at a May 2024 for our opening of the facility. And I certainly would take any questions that you may have regarding the project.
What are you going to do in the covered structure that's not there anymore?
Well, it's going to be a hard court, so we'll have, it'll be blacktop, but then it'll be multiple uses, pickleball, basketball, those kinds of things, along with, it certainly the covered structure would have provided weather protection for you know, events that we may have had in there, you know, movies or small market types of programs and activities and those kinds of things. Originally, we were looking to have an ice rink there with a refrigerated ice rink, but that ended up being removed through the approval process.
A question along that same line, Scott. So will this part of the facility on the left be designed so that in the future we could put a covered structure over it? We could put an ice rink in there if somebody wanted to. We've made mistakes in this city on projects that you don't put the infrastructure in to go back later. I think in the long run, my son lives where there is a covered infrastructure like this, which is ice and basketball and skating and summer. He's in Minneapolis and they use it 12 months a year. I think in the long run, we're going to want to do this to make this hub there. I know the money's not there now, but I want an assurance it's been designed that way so you can flex it if money does become available.
It is. The trouble is, though, with the refrigerated system for the ice rink, that we're not including, but we are including locations for the, you know, the foundations for the bollard that would hold the covered structure. So yes, we are designing it with the hope that and the possibility of having a covered structure in the future. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
My
welcome.
second question, and I'm looking at Mike or Andy, didn't we get a grant for the pump track? So that's being, I think it's important to see to know is this, that Phil Groupie, our sustainability specialist, went out and got a grant to help fund the pump track.
That is correct. We received $150,000 towards that project, and we're working on the final details agreement, and then that'll get to the council for final acceptance of those dollars. Yeah.
Thank you.
Likewise. I apologize I failed to mention that.
Hey, Scott, who is the grant from?
Dane County Park and yeah, I can get that for you, Joyce. But it's a bicycle.
Ben Lyman, isn't it in through the state?
Boy,
I can look it up on my email, so keep going and I'll find it.
I thought the grant was through the county, but I'm not sure the ultimate source of the funding.
I'll find it.
Thank you.
I have one question. Did Saris not contribute some money to that?
Well, they have
At least at the
indicated
presentation before council.
Well, they've indicated that they're interested. We haven't secured any type funding. They certainly have been supportive and enthusiastic about the project and you know, a local private partner.
Well, good, because I know they spoke before council and they very supportive of the project, and
we're hoping to.
It was good to hear.
Secure some funding from them.
Perfect.
Scott, what's the capacity of both meeting rooms? And I see it has a wall that's looks like it's movable.
Yes, yes. So in theory, the room to the north is 666 square feet, and they're relatively small, both individually. The one to the south is a little bit larger, but you did note, Mr. in the middle there's a retractable wall, if you would, that would accordion into the wall for storage. So it does open up for a larger room. One other feature that I might mention, and I don't know if you can see it on the drawing, but on the north end, overhead glass roll down door. So that's similar to our Hugo Jamestown project, where you can open or close that door. And you know, if you look at the conceptual drawings are really, it really is a cool space. A lot of natural light with glass to the east and south. That kind of view into the gathering location. There is a slight overhang or shelter to the south. You can see that where people can gather. But really a community space that we're trying to create, and certainly I know you're aware of all the development that's going on in this area, so very walkable too, if you would. So we're really excited about it, to be honest with you. I will say funding for the project was the majority of the funding. There is a bit of borrowing, maybe 80 or 90,000 if I recall, but the construction budget is coming from parkland dedication fees. So those are all dollars that are coming from the development in the corridor.
Scott, could you remind me, the office to the south, who are we contemplating that the tenant would be on that?
Pardon me?
So the office that you've included in the southern part of the building,
Yeah.
who would you foresee as being the
Well,
tenant of the office?
that I would foresee, potentially city staff, Andy. Certainly, I'm thinking we'll do a similar process for rental at this point for the facility. If we have a rental for the meeting rooms, we'll have an attendant, so that'll be a location for them. It'll also provide an area for residents to come in and get access to a computer and those kinds of things. Another neat feature that we're really looking towards is to have Wi-Fi at this location. Due to the healthy neighborhood and the resources, we feel that it's important that this would provide access to Wi-Fi, a hotspot, if you would, for that. So that's included in our design. I envision a lot of our healthy neighborhood partners, the grant recipients who, have programs and those kinds of things that, they may, have some office hours or that, if you would.
Scott, what's the square footage of the other office, or the other meeting room?
It's 754. And I'll give you, I didn't have enough copies, Joyce. I'll give you one of these that has those details on it.
All right.
So very, very exciting project.
Yes, it is.
And again, CETA, you guys had the vision, so here's the result of your vision, and we appreciate it.
All right, were there any other questions from CETA about this project? All right, if not, we can move on to our next item, which is the Park and Open Space Plan update, and I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. And this is the Park and Rec Department's planning document. And typically, it's a 5-year plan. It does have a couple different pieces to it, including inventory and amenities and those kinds of things. But the section of the plan that I wanted to share with CETA is the action items. And actually what happens, the process, the Park and Open Space Plan will provide, with approval from the council, provide staff direction on action items. And I know one that is of interest to the group here is actually action item 3, explore revision of the system, classification and standards, parkland dedication, open space requirements for development projects, and those types of things. And I know that's an item that CETA is very interested in, and we too feel that there's different potential options on how we can, the amount of land that we take for parkland dedication, along with park improvement fees and those kinds of things. I will be, up front that the needle that we're trying to thread, which is a difficult one, is these funds at this point are allowed or we're able to use those to construct the new playgrounds and facilities, if you would, and the new parks, if you would. But we're not allowed to use these funds for operating expenses. So it's really, that's the tough part. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive into these ordinances and see if there isn't strategies or opportunities or ways in which we can try and subsidize the operational budget to help us maintain these new projects. I will mention, which is kind of interesting, is we do actually, the city has a new designated GIS coordinator who's inventorying all the park properties, and we're up to about 75 different parcels as far as holdings and over 800 acres of public land that we have. So that's growing pretty quickly with all the developments. And that too, I guess I would share, was kind of on hold a bit with the changing in the planning department, but now with the planning department fully staffed, we're picking this initiative back up.
All right. Were there any questions from CETA on the Park and Open Space Plan update?
I appreciate the opportunity. Give me a call anytime.
All right.
A question for our alders. So it's going back to the council. That's the next, and Scott, that's the next step. Is that correct? Or is it all passed?
For the Park and Open Space Plan?
No, I'm still back on the hub.
Yep, it's all passed. The Common Council decided on the final design. Now we're working with Enberg to do the final revisions, or actually the details, to get it to bid documents so that we can bid it in February. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's on track. Yeah. Yep. It's on track. It's crazy that a $30,000 study is turning into a $4+ million public building, which is cool.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the operating expenses, Scott, because that's where the rubber meets the road as far as, I'm concerned. Like you said, the construction cost has been, pretty much planned, and they're out there. But it's the operating expenses that really concerns me about the budget, especially going forward.
Yeah, and I'm echoing Jim's concerns as well. Those operating, I understand that some of those numbers have already doubled. And you mentioned a $4 million project, and I thought we had approved around 3.5 or 6 million. But we know there's going to be additional costs. So, which will have to be borrowed. I think that's the objective. And speaking with Misty, that's my understanding. You mentioned the borrowed dollars.
Well, there is a bit of borrowing that goes with
any overages, from my understanding, would be borrowed dollars.
And we certainly, the goal is to stay within the Common Council authorized budget for the project.
Very good. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, just an FYI. I sent you an email about the Vibrant Spaces grant that's out. I don't know if you want to hop on the webinar to see if there's some funding that we might be able to get through that. I know it's not a lot, but every little bit helps.
Thanks, Scooter.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 9 is the Buxton presentation. Mr. Brian Marion is Vice President of Sales. Mike, if you want to give us a little intro into this.
Sure. I had a chance to get a presentation from Brian and Lily, who are joining us today from Buxton. They're a market research and data firm, and one of the reasons for having them come forward this morning to share some of the resources that are available through their company, if we would decide to engage in an economic development partnership with them, is for that market research and data as we kind of look around the city for what are some of those end users that we would like to see, retail, commercial? We get a lot of questions, especially in Uptown. When are we going to see a grocery store? When are we going to see the coffee shop, some other retail, commercial services? Some years ago, we used to run some trade ring reports from a company by the name of Claritas and Nielsen, and then they changed some of their processes, so we haven't run one of those for a while. So I wanted to kind of bring Buxton forward here, have them share their data and capabilities with this group. We also have a line item in the proposed 2023 budget if we would decide to proceed and go forward, but just wanted to get this information in front of CETA and also the council to see if it's something that would be of interest. We think, Joyce and I, that there could be some benefit to this. And once you hear the presentation, I think you'll see the capabilities and the opportunities with the kind of reports and data and information that we could actually run as we're working with individual end users and for specific development. So after they do the presentation, I'll maybe chime in a little bit more about kind of where the funds would come from that I discussed with Misty, and then kind of the geographic areas that we would look to, that this assistance would be helpful for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian and to Lily.
Excellent. Thank you, CETA. Thank you, Mike and Joyce, for organizing our participation here this morning. I'm going to bring up my screen here. So, Mike, if you could confirm when we have my presentation up here, that would be excellent.
Yes, we've got it on the screen, Brian.
Excellent, excellent. So, to all CETA members here this morning, again, I'm Brian Marion. I'm Vice President here at Buxton. Buxton is based in Fort Worth, Texas. We've been in business for almost 30 years now, and primarily over that course of time have really been serving not only communities, but serving companies that make site selection decisions every day throughout the United States. Now, when we talk about companies, we really focus on companies that have a consumer focus. So whether that's retail, restaurants, hospitality, healthcare, in some cases automotive, electric vehicle type companies. But all of these organizations that you see here on the screen, as well as thousands of others, leverage Buxton every day to help to better understand what types of customers are driving their business and how they can leverage that information to go out and make a more informed site selection decision for expanding their portfolio, entering new markets, and really taking a more informed, objective approach to growing their business. Now, over the past 16 or so years, we've been working in the public sector with communities, cities, economic development organizations, chambers of commerce, CVBs, all of those public-facing organizations that leverage information from Buxton to do a couple different things. One is to, as Mike alluded to, just having a foundational resource of information as a baseline for the community, understanding what makes your residents and visitors unique, supporting local businesses that are already in operation, as well as using that information to support the case for new business attraction across numerous different sectors of the economy. Now, what Buxton's partnership provides and what is outlined in the proposal that I believe you have in your packet there in front of you is really a foundational tool for Mike and Joyce and the city as a whole to have access to leverage on a day-to-day basis, covering hundreds of different data sets, tracking tens of thousands of brands across the U.S., really digging into household level data, which is critical when you think about analyzing a site in the context that a brand would be looking at a new site, and combining that all together with more real-time mobile device GPS data to support more current and up-to-date information beyond what you may gather from the Census Bureau, for instance. So the first thing I wanted to take a look at here is one of the key components in our partnership platform is what is called Globalytic. And this is leveraging a combination of that household level data that companies use to evaluate their potential customers. And I wanted to look at this in the context of one of the primary corridors there in Fitchburg, the Orchard Point Retail Center, anchored by Target and numerous other tenants. Now, Mike and I had discussed the opportunity that presents itself just across the street from the Orchard Point Shopping Center. So using what's already there and operating, I wanted to first show kind of the depth and scope of the attraction of that center that you guys have operating currently through Mobalytics. So what we're looking at here is that shopping center and its visitors over the past 12 months through 2 days ago. And all of those dots that you see there on the screen represent households of visitors that came to that shopping center over that 12-month period. Now, as you can see here, quite a large draw into that area over the past 12 months. This expands out nationally, but to keep it local and regional, looking at that focal point around Fitchburg. And as you can see, drawing in incredibly well to that shopping center currently. Now, while seeing where people are coming from is certainly valuable, what Buxton brings to the table is, again, that household level perspective on what makes every single one of those visitors unique that's visiting the shopping center for any of those tenants that are operating. And what we do is we put together these household profiles leveraging Experian Mosaic segmentation data, which for those unfamiliar with household segmentation data is you could view it as a next level deeper than just traditional demographics. So thinking about what makes a particular consumer unique from that lifestyle perspective, not only demographically, but from products, services, marketing trends, all those other factors, those hundreds of other data points that influence someone to be a unique customer of a business. Now, these all have unique names here, but what we're seeing is kind of a top 5 list of the different types of people that are coming to that shopping center. And as we'll see here in the next slide, just those 2 top segments of your visitors may appear the same at a high level, but when you dig down into the data, they have some drastically different characteristics. Now, on the left side, your top visitor profile to the shopping center, you see a consumer that is predominantly 25 to 30, has a modest household income, is predominantly a renter, and renting in large multifamily type properties around the greater area. Conversely, that secondary profile, your number 2 visitor to that shopping center, is predominantly a household represented by residents 36 to 45. They have a drastically higher household income. They're homeowners. They predominantly have young kids in that age range of 10 to 12 and own a single family home. Now, beyond this just tip of the iceberg here, this is the type of information that our clients in the private sector side look at to understand their customers better than just seeing a population, a drive time, really understanding what types of customers drive their business and where they can go find more of them. And from the city's perspective, allowing Mike, Joyce, and your stakeholders to get a more granular view of who are your predominant customers, what makes them unique, and where can you go find more of them. Now, I know some of the challenges that Mike and I had discussed previously revolved around kind of proving out the trade area for Fitchburg for different sites, whether it's to the east and uptown or to the west at this site adjacent to Orchard Point. And so using some of this granular data for some of your primary retail tenants, we can take a look at how far or how close they're drawing in the majority of their customers. So just as an example snapshot here for some retailers there in Fitchburg, across grocery with Pick and Save and Hy-Vee, Aldi as well as retail restaurant with Mod Pizza, Buffalo Wild Wings, Noodles and Company. You'll notice there the trade area where visitors to each of those brands are being drawn in from, that Pick and Save, the predominant amount of their visitors coming from about 18 minutes drive time away, versus some of those restaurants that you have there in Fitchburg drawing from 25, 37, even 44 minutes away. So when we think about trade areas at Buxton, it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. it's really being able to identify the unique trade areas that different types of tenants have in the marketplace. And not only that, but understanding of those tenants you have, how many visitors and visits do they have over the past 12 months? And on the right side of your screen here, how do your locations for these brands stack up in relation to their operating footprint across the region and nationally? So our community and economic development partners are leveraging this information to not only, again, get that baseline of information on where are people coming from to get to their retail tenants, what makes those customers unique from a household level, and how are our existing retail tenants doing beyond just the sales tax rolls that you may get from the state or county or city, but in the context of their national footprint, do you have high performing locations for those stores? And using that to put together a story for potential future tenants that could plant their flag in Fitchburg. Now, to combine this information together, what we just looked at here is really the application of existing business. Now, what Mike and I had discussed previously is looking at the future. And what we want to do to assist with business attraction is leveraging a component of our platform called Buxton Match. Now, what Match is doing is taking a lot of the information that we just saw in those Mobalytics analyses and allowing the Economic Development Office to apply this information to potential sites for attraction, whether that's a piece of land, an existing building. You have the ability to look at thousands of different retail brands across hundreds of different categories, whether that's grocery, restaurant, retail, healthcare, any type of consumer-based brand that you would want to look at, and be able to create an on-demand site selection analysis specific to that brand at your location and make sure that it's evaluated in the context of that brand. Now, just as an example here, I took a look at that development site on McKee Road across the street from Orchard Point. And this was the parcel that Mike and I had discussed on, potentially a grocery concept, potentially mixed use, potentially, a number of different items here for attraction. Now, leveraging Buxton Match, just looking at a grocery example, we had talked about a handful of different brands that Mike felt would be attractive to the community and draw in new consumers to Fitchburg outside of the city limits. I took a look at Sprouts Farmers Market, which is a growing national grocery brand, similar in concept to perhaps a Whole Foods, but from a footprint standpoint, maybe a slightly smaller footprint from a store perspective. And so looking at 10 of the Sprouts locations closest to that site at McKee Road and understanding their customers that they've seen in those 10 stores over the past 12 months in relation to the customer base surrounding that trade area in Fitchburg, what we can identify in a matter of minutes here is a output showing that in the Fitchburg trade area right now for Sprouts, the overall volume of customers that Sprouts sees in those 10 closest store trade areas, not quite up to par, but from a customer mix and similarity standpoint, think those profiles we saw earlier, the mix and similarity of customer types that Sprouts sees in their stores and in their trade areas is very positive. So what this is telling us, and when our community and economic development clients see a result like this is reflective of perhaps a growing trade area. And I know there are several developments on the table for multifamily, single family homes. And what's beneficial about this Buxton Match reporting is the dynamic nature of the data and providing Mike and Joyce and your stakeholders the ability to come in and say, okay, we've created this analysis here today, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, you would have the ability to come in and have an updated analysis to that point in time on how your trade area has changed. So you're not stuck with an annualized look at the data and have more real-time insights throughout the course of the year as to how your market is changing in the context of the brand that you're evaluating. And as we can see here with those customers, you have your profiles here for Sprouts' top 5 customers that they see in their stores. On that left column, the number of households present in that trade area around Fitchburg, around this site, specific to Sprouts. And on the right column, the number of those households present in Sprouts' typical trade area. So again, reinforcing the point on saying that, hey, we have the customers you're looking for. We're a growing community. These households and this data will continue to evolve, but Fitchburg will have the advantage of the on-demand nature of the resources to provide this to not only city stakeholders, but brands, developers, commercial real estate representatives across the U.S. that you may have meetings with throughout the year, may want to approach for new development, and really ultimately help bring the city to an even further elevated position at the table when negotiating and trying to attract businesses that are in the best interest of the city as a whole. So with that, I'll open up to questions, but I just wanted to have my contact information here as well. I know we walked through a lot of information here today, and as Mike is well aware, we went into this into depth previously, but just wanted to walk through some examples here on what it is we're bringing to the table and how dynamic it is that communities are leveraging this information on a daily basis across the U.S.
Sure. I just wanted to chime in and say that when I met with Brian and Lily, we talked specifically about the 3 corridors, the north-south corridors that we have. So Uptown, where it's a newly emerging neighborhood, where this data could be helpful. And as Brian said, as it continues to build out, where we can get real-time data over time to show people the growing and emerging market over there. We also talked about the Northfish Hatchery Road corridor as we continue to fill in, and you could see in the Sprouts example there about how many households are kind of in their prototypical stores and where our numbers kind of line up with that, right now. And then the third one is over there along Orchard Point. As we mentioned before, a firm by the name of Coburn Hundley has the Shea Quarry property under contract and is working on doing their site due diligence right now, but then is going to be working on putting together a comprehensive development plan. So those are kind of the 3 corridors that this data would be very helpful as we try and identify potential users that maybe match up well with us or might be on our radar screen, and that we can provide better information and data as we try and reach out to them. Also working with our local developer partners too that have these properties under contract. So with that, I'll let CETA members kind of chime in with questions.
So Mike, what tools are you using now in order to attract businesses?
I think that's where we've been struggling right now. Like I said, we used to run the Claritas kind of Nielsen trade ring reports, and then that company's been acquired by multiple different entities over time, and they changed some of their policies and procedures as far as the licensing agreements there that as Joyce and I looked at that, it really restricted how we could kind of use that information and data, and it didn't seem to be worth kind of our investment in that anymore. I used to run that annually, actually, but it's a snapshot in time, and it doesn't kind of give us that updated real-time data that we could run it again in 3, 6, 9, 12 months to show people. That was just a one-time annual snapshot that we were doing each year. Just for a very basic example, when I first started here 27 years ago, And Mayor Doug Morris said, Mike, we need a hotel in Fitchburg. And I was putting the word out to developers that we needed a hotel in Fitchburg, and they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And but I knew from talking to our major companies, Promega, Thermo, CDW, Burby at that time, that there was good corporate room night demand out here. And then, of course, we got the overflow from the greater Madison region with kind of visitor, football, sport and rec activities and the overflow from the World Dairy Expo and stuff. And then I started running the Claritas report, so that was one piece. But then I also met a gentleman in Fitchburg here that had done worked in the hotel industry and helped me put together a market demand survey. And all of a sudden, between at least providing some information, basic information from Claritas and that room night demand survey that we did, I could go to those hotel companies, and all of a sudden the conversation was a lot different. And it was like, oh, Fitchburg could use a hotel. So it went from, Mike, you're kind of crazy. We don't think Fitchburg could use a hotel, because it was hard to always get data about Fitchburg because of the zip codes and things like that. Obviously, a lot of data sources have changed, now with technology, so it's even more powerful. But that was very helpful back in the day to help us land our first hotel, here in Fitchburg. So I think it tells the story of the power of being able to have good data and information as we're having conversations with end users. And we don't necessarily have that right now in our database or toolkit at this point in time.
So how much did that cost, the previous?
Yeah, the Claritas is pretty basic. I think they're up to what, Joyce, about 1,000 now? 500, but again, that's a lot more limited than what, this tool would provide as far as the customer profile and insight. And that one is probably more census-driven and maybe not as real-time data-driven as this platform.
Is that one also site-specific?
Yeah.
You can't do an analysis of the whole city. I want
right.
a trade ring of this parcel.
Mm-hmm. And it also doesn't give us that that kind of match, system there. It gives us kind of retail segments and categories kind of through like SIC codes and things like that, but it doesn't get into real specific detail of matching up with those exact kind of retailers that we wanted to reach out to. The reason I did the Sprouts example there, and I visited their locations in Kansas City because my brother lives there and was very impressed with it. Another example would be the Fresh Time kind of grocery. There's one in downtown Milwaukee in a mixed-use building along the river front development there. But I always hear from our Fitchburg residents that they would like to see a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's, here. So I don't know if the greater Madison region is big enough yet for a second location of either one of those. And Whole Foods right now is expanding over off of University Avenue in the Hill Farms development. I think they're going to be doubling the size and capacity. So I was trying to figure out what were some comparable kind of grocers, in that sphere of more of a Whole Foods-esque, and that's why we used those as or Sprouts as an example in kind of looking at one of the reports. But as you could see there, we're shy. We've got the customer profile that Sprouts looks for in their locations, but we're shy on the numbers there. So we got the profile, but we need to fill in that trade ring, again with households and disposable income.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Mike and maybe Brian, but you mentioned data and zip codes. What kind of challenge does that present for Fitchburg? I mean, we have multiple zip codes, and they overlap into other municipalities. Is that create a challenge as far as obtaining the data?
I don't think it. I think it did years ago, back 27 years ago. But with the advances in technology and kind of the pings of data, with our phones and where we all are, and where Brian pointed out the example of where people were coming from for Orchard Point. Now that we've got that kind of technologically driven data, I think we don't have the same challenges, that we had years ago. As far as trying to get good information on Fitchburg.
Good.
If we utilize those data sources, something similar to Buxton here. And Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the conversation beyond Fitchburg, you would certainly not be limited to just Fitchburg data. You know, Mike and Joyce, you would have the ability to look at, you know, that Whole Foods, those Costco's in Greater Madison, in Milwaukee, down in Chicagoland, you know, wherever you want to pull data from, you have the ability to do that through this, and it would not just be limited to the city of Fitchburg. So a ton of value there, particularly when you're going after some of these brands that might just have zero familiarity with Fitchburg at all, like Sprouts, and being able to put it in the context of their stores nationally, regionally, locally as well. So it all kind of comes full circle and allows you to look at the bigger picture in terms of what Fitchburg presents beyond the borders of the city.
And Andy, I would just add one other kind of difference with Claritas there. With Claritas, we were running a 1 mile, a 3 mile, and a 10 mile trade ring, and it was just kind of this specific circle. I think the example that Brian pointed out, the drive time to specific retail and commercial centers isn't just a clean circle. There, as you could see, it was kind of jagged and scattershot. So that's the benefit of the kind of data-driven information that Buxton can provide. So you really see what is that drive time and specific trade ring versus just us carving out a simple circle.
Brian, how do you tell that a customer is going to be coming from 44 minutes or 16 minutes or 8 minutes away? Do you interview these people?
We couldn't hear that on the computer, by the way.
Well, that explains it. The question I had is, how do you tell that the customer base is 44, 38, 18 minutes away? Are you interviewing these people that are going to these facilities? What's the connection? How do you tell?
So safe to say we're not standing in front of the stores to interview them because that would take quite a bit of time. But what we're looking at is for each of those stores that we saw and I'll just bring up this slide here so we can see that. For each of these store locations, Buxton is creating a digital boundary, a geofence around every single one of those business locations. The building itself, not the parking lot, and looking at the people that came into that location. And what Buxton does is we look at where those mobile devices, those people, where that device slept for 8 hours a night on a regular basis as that household location. And this drive time is reflective of 75% of the visitors captured in each of these store locations over the past 12 months, represented by a drive time. So it is de-identified. We are security compliant across the board, SOC 2 type privacy. So I couldn't say, you know, Mike went to Pick and Save, went to Mod Pizza, grabbed lunch, went to the office and went home. But we do know at a very granular level where people went, where they originate from, and how to reflect that across numerous different business types.
So it's by cell phone data?
That's correct. It's a combination of that cell phone data as well as that household level data, so we can create that profile that we saw on those unique different customer types.
All right,
So
thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
I said thank you.
So I'm curious, this sounds so much more intuitive compared to what Mike was using previously. And I don't know how to, if you can answer this, but what makes you proprietary or superior to other tracking technology that is available? Because as much as this is very intuitive, I mean, this isn't new technology to like SEO and checking all the analytics. What makes you different from any other company that does this similar thing?
Sure. So everything we've reviewed here today is built and created by Buxton and was originally done so to serve our private sector clients. So Buxton works on a daily basis with hundreds of different private sector, retail, restaurant, healthcare organizations throughout the United States. And this data that we're seeing here was built out of a need by those companies to gain more granular insights on their customers, on their businesses. And the data here is, you guys can look at mobile data a bunch of different ways, but what ultimately is the value here is the so what aspect of it. What makes each of your tenants that you have now unique from a trade area perspective? How do you identify the unique types of customers that you have coming in? But then to answer that so what, how do you apply that data to look at potential new businesses in the context in which they would look at a particular trade area for development? So it's connecting the dots from just being kind of a, the wow factor of seeing where everybody's coming from, but why is that important? And what does that mean to a given business? So there are, again, numerous data sets available beyond this in our platform that allow for kind of more rudimentary analysis as well, but Buxton Maps, Buxton Mobalytics, and the proprietary nature in which we created these reports to give you an answer versus just giving you a report that says kind of here's the baseline environment, but this is what it means to a particular company. So that is ultimately where that value and where those dots are connected for economic development.
Mark's been waiting very patiently here.
It's not very often a room full of people can keep me quiet. How much of this data that obviously can get, I'm sure, very, very specific, how much of it does it actually drive the growth because we're basing it on what we have versus reacting to the needs of an area? Or does it kind of do both? I mean, when you're pulling an area and you've got your sample size, and then you're basing your businesses that way versus reacting on the needs.
Yeah, so, again, to your point, it is looking at the current state of the market, but what it's doing is allowing you to, A, save time and perhaps pursuing businesses that might be read across the board here on the screen and might not ultimately be worth your time, and allowing you to really drill into, okay, what makes the most sense now? And then next quarter, next year, or at any cadence that you want to come in, that household level data is updated on that monthly basis. You have that real-time cut of information here to look at where people are coming from, look at competing stores across Greater Madison, understand how those trade areas change over time. And when you have new residents move into the community, when those multifamily or single family homes are developed and the population increases, this adapts to that and allows you to evolve the analysis with it. So, allowing you to save time on the front end, have a very targeted pursuit of who you're going to go after and why, and what that looks like in the context of the residents and people coming into Fitchburg. So that's kind of where it goes back to the on-demand nature of it and being able to create analyses around any point in time and what that reflects at that point in time versus just taking a more annualized kind of cookie cutter approach with a 1, 3, 10 mile radius ring.
Brian, thank you for the presentation. I have one question related to your presentation and one that's outside the box here, is that the data, if you run data for Fitchburg in that, let's stay on that Sprout thing, does that data then, if Verona contracts with you, are they able to get access to our data, so to speak? Who owns the data when the reports are run? That's question one, so part one.
Yeah. So, in our partnership, it would be a one-to-one partnership with the city of Fitchburg and Buxton. So any reports that you create are, they are owned theoretically by you. So you would have the ability to download those reports, hyperlink them to the Fitchburg Economic Development page, use them in marketing material. You can export these reports into PDFs, image files, hyperlinks. If you're going to a trade show or going to a marketing event on behalf of the city, it's all meant to be presentable and used to pitch the city. Now, in that example, if the city of Verona was contracted with Buxton as well, they could certainly look at sites in Fitchburg if they wanted to, or look at data in Fitchburg, but you wouldn't necessarily see a report that they're creating because it's you live in your own ecosystem here in the platform outside of any other clients. So you wouldn't necessarily see what another city is creating. But to your question, if both cities were contracted with Buxton, they could certainly look at the opposite city, or you guys could look at Verona or anywhere else that you wanted to as well.
Okay, thank you. And my second one is more an observation. We're beginning to hear that businesses are going to, they're having trouble getting workers now. If we've got a great scenario for what you're describing across from the Target and Hy-Vee store over there, but are you looking at all at the labor force availability in any of this? Or are you just looking at the consumer side?
So this is not necessarily meant to be viewed as kind of an occupational tool. So this wouldn't necessarily support the case of saying, okay, this makes a ton of business sense from Sprout's perspective, but they may have some challenges hiring 50, 60 employees. That would kind of be outside of the purview of what this is meant to provide. And that's kind of where it may fall in the hands of, the workforce development office or any similar type of office there to support the growth of that local labor force. So really what this is meant to do is to get over that initial hurdle of Fitchburg has a great site and we'd love to have you here, but Fitchburg has a great site, we'd love to have you here, and this makes a ton of sense based on the customers that you see in your nearest stores to us, and this is what it looks like in that apples-to-apples context.
Okay, thank you.
Let me get a red light. All right. I understand that how you can track where the people come from, but now how do you track whether they're a homeowner or an apartment dweller? How do you track what their income level is, what their disposable income is? How do you identify particular classes within these people that are visiting your stores?
Yeah, great question. So behind, and I'll bring this slide up again just for context, behind these profiles, so again, this is leveraging Experian household level data that we have updated on a monthly basis. So Experian, everyone knows, is the credit tracking company, but through that, tracking hundreds of different variables surrounding these households. So there are 71 different household profiles in our system, going on kind of a scale of most affluent to most economically challenged. And behind these profiles here, which Mike and Joyce would have the insights to gather, looking at the propensity or the presence of each of these types of households to either A, reside in a single family home or a multifamily type of property. What are those more basic demographics associated with those households, but looking at really granular details such as what brand of car do they drive, how do you best market to these types of households, what does that discretionary income look like, all sorts of different nuances on the consumer profile derived through that household level data. So this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, kind of high level snapshot, but behind the data here and also accessible in our platform tools, you have the ability to get extremely granular in the types of data points that you're pulling out including those items that you mentioned.
So the bottom line is, it's not specific as to Fitchburg, but it's specific as to the averages of these 71 different items that you're checking off.
Right. So it's meant to be portrayed in an apples to apples context nationally. So, you know, if you looked at an 054 in Fitchburg, that 054 data holds true in Madison and Milwaukee and anywhere else in the U.S. So, again, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have the ability to, you know, go pinpoint Mike's house and see which household he is, but I'd be willing to bet there's a profile in here that might resonate very strongly with him.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you go ahead, Joyce.
Hey, Brian, it's Joyce. So we have, you know, Jim asked how we kind of do our recruitments, and we're the old-fashioned, we go and type up that nice little letter saying, hey, we want you here in Fitchburg, and we send it off and they go to Madison. At what point should we be reaching out to these retailers? Because we feel as though we have a lot of potential, but I know that retailers aren't always going to base their decisions on potential. They want facts. I guess I'm wondering how we would use this data to tell our story about where we're at now and where we're going to be in the future. You know, we're one of the fastest growing communities in Dane County and in the state of Wisconsin, and we have been for several years. At what point would we want to do that kind of outreach?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say, first of all, just the fact that Fitchburg has yourself and Mike on staff and willing and able to make that outreach is a massive hurdle that a lot of communities have, and that they just don't have the staff to do that themselves. But with you and your roles and with the growth that's happening and, you know, understanding what makes the most sense from the resident's point of view, but also from what the data is telling us, what we typically see from our community clients is putting together information like this. And this is something that, you know, obviously we walk through with you in our partnership and kind of guide you on best practices. But, you know, when you're working on that marketing material and putting that story together for the community, using this as one component of that to tell that overall story of, you know, this is what's happening currently in Fitchburg. This is where our growth is going. These are the brands that have a very high potential to realize their customer and their success here in Fitchburg. And then moving forward, having the ability to have that regular cadence of updated data, but always being relevant to the brands that you would pursue. So if there are, you know, companies that, you know, say have already located in Madison, one of the really opportune resources in here is looking at data like this and being able to validate, you know, across Dane County or you know, elsewhere around the region, that Fitchburg residents are having to drive maybe an extensive amount of time to reach that store's location across town, and presenting the data in the context of not only their existing footprint, but the potential they would have to realize their customer base in a new location. So, you know, from a marketing standpoint, being able to connect those dots specifically for the brand, but also putting the story together for the community. And, you know, at the end of the day, having kind of the material and the information that retailers speak, so to say, as Buxton has, you know, that name brand and that experience throughout the private sector in retail, restaurant, healthcare, so on and so forth. So, you know, when a company would see Buxton information, it's going to be relevant and it's going to be pertinent to them to further evaluate, along with all the other aspects and components that the city would pitch itself for marketing purposes.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian, can you share, I think it was a community in, was it Indiana that you, when I asked you the question about kind of what would be kind of a comparable community to Fitchburg and how are they using the data? I think there was one in Indiana that you referenced. Can you just kind of share a little perspective on that? And then also, in addition to that, how is the data able to be used on kind of our public website as far as like a dashboard?
Yeah. So to your first question, two kind of case examples in Indiana. The city of Logansport, Indiana, engaged with Buxton to support the redevelopment of a mall that they had there that had lost their anchor tenants and had kind of become kind of an eyesore in the community. And through our partnership and their relationship with a developer that was actually out of Chicago, they were able to leverage the data that we've seen here today, including Match and Mobalytics, to not only backfill those anchor tenants with new retail tenants to support the needs of the community, such as a TJ Maxx and brands like that, but also due to the home building that was going on around there and kind of the regional hub that community presented itself as, was able to attract a Hampton Inn hotel on that property. And now that property, over the course of 2 years, is entering kind of further phases of development into kind of a much larger opportunity for mixed-use development than the community originally realized. Now, the other example I'll mention in Indiana was with the city of Westfield, Indiana, and the Grand Park Sports Complex that they have there. I know one of the hot topics in economic development right now is youth sports facility development. They leveraged our partnership to not only understand where people were coming from to get to that athletic facility that they had invested in and built, but use that data to leverage attraction of businesses into their community, to locate into their community so that they did not lose sales tax and visitors to neighboring communities. So throughout the course of that time, they were able to land a Chick-fil-A as well as some supplemental restaurants and retail around that site. And that Chick-fil-A location is actually one of the highest traffic locations there in the region now. Whereas previous to that insight and the knowledge of the base of visitors that were truly coming in there and resonated as a Chick-fil-A customer, they likely never would have been able to land that business there. So I know there are some brands where you may be approaching a franchisee versus a corporate entity, and this data is relevant to both sides. So if you do have, say, a franchisee of a brand locally there in Madison or out of the Milwaukee or Chicago areas, really being able to put data together to speak to the potential in relation to their local or regional footprint. Now, to your second question on the accessibility of the data in relation to the website, that is absolutely one of the things that we recommend and you have the ability to do. Many of our clients have like a data page on their economic development website with reports like this or other reports through our platform, typically hyperlinked into that website in PDF form, and sometimes based on the city as a whole, sometimes based on particular development sites that are posted and marketed on the website as well. So you would absolutely have the ability to post this information to your website and make it accessible as well.
And then another question on the match analysis there, where we looked at a specific example of Sprouts. Could we look at it and run a report differently where we put in, let's say, a quick casual restaurant category and do a search of, based on existing conditions on that quarry site across from Orchard Point, which quick casual restaurants Fitchburg already would score high with the customer profile, but also with the sheer number of customers to kind of give us a list of who would go there now. Because I think, as I mentioned to you when we first started the conversation about maybe engaging in a partnership with Buxton, if I'm going to utilize some resources from our budget and our finance department, I need to produce results and some deliverables here that we're going to land some end users, and it's going to expand the tax base and everything. So I just was kind of looking at that instant analysis of those that we already could attract at this point in time.
Yeah, and so, to that point, Match allows you the flexibility to either look and report on a specific brand like we did for Sprouts, or look at it from a category level. So quick service restaurants, full service restaurants, coffee, snack and beverage, Starbucks type things, fitness, hundreds of different categories. And what that will allow you to do is to look at that category either based on the brands already operating in, say, the Madison market, the state of Wisconsin, the multi-state region, including Wisconsin, or even nationally, and present a stacked ranked list of which brands would be kind of in that top 5, top 10, top 15 target list for you out of, dozens or 100 different brands in that category. So it really allows you to kind of look at a particular site in a number of different geographic contexts. And so, to your point on, seeing the Sprouts in Kansas City, that analysis we pulled up here included some of those Kansas City locations. So, you have the ability to pull in opportunities for that quarry site, for instance, that are brands that may not even have a footprint in Wisconsin right now, but are analyzed in the context of their stores out of state and your market there in Fitchburg.
And just another question, does the data set, so let's say in the coffee example, there's the nationals like, Starbucks and Caribou and everything, but would the data set also show us some of the local coffee shops here? Like we've got Collectivo, we've got Grace Coffee, that would show us do they show up in your data set there as far as kind of those local restaurants and categories?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So Match is looking at about 5,500 brands across more regional, national, kind of corporate branded concepts. So for those brands, like the coffee shops, for instance, that may only have 1 or 2 locations around the community, that's where the flexibility in Globalytics allows you to perhaps geofence and evaluate their customer base from that household level analysis we looked at previously, to not only provide information to that local business on where their customers are coming from, what makes those customers unique, those profiles, and then being able to apply that data back to a new location to see, hey, within XYZ drive time rings, within radius rings, within the city itself, here is the presence of your top customers in this specific area that we want to position you at for a new site. So there are some ways that you can kind of take an end around route to get to that answer to support local businesses as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So to follow up on that question, I guess, how particular can you be if you have a business that's located in like a retail complex that there are multiple tenants? Is that harder to geofence out, or is it presumably it's easier if you have like a standalone location?
It goes both ways. So, for instance, the analysis that we looked at for these stores, some of them were standalone, but there are certainly other inline, shopping center brands, and we geofence those based on kind of the defined reported real estate footprint of that building. So it is, without getting into the weeds on the data, it is possible to look at a standalone or an inline type retailer.
Thanks.
Brian, it's Joyce again. I just have one kind of question, and that's probably more personal. How much training do you give us? Because I'm not really convinced that technology is here to stay. I think we're going to go back to paper at some day. So for us dinosaurs, what type of training do you provide to Mike and I?
Yeah. So the way that it works is we have a initial kind of kickoff and onboarding session. Really got to kind of go through some of the basics. You know, what data is available at your fingertips? Where does it live? You know, what do the reports look like? But then what we do following that is I typically put together time on a regular cadence that works for Mike and yourself to walk through setting up particular sites in the platform and talking through kind of best practices and case examples on how our economic development clients will report on particular situations or scenarios and kind of all the kind of what else factors that you can draw into an analysis, even beyond what we just looked at here today. So whether that's, you know, 3 times a week, twice a week, weekly, bi-weekly, what have you, you know, it's really up to Mike and yourself and the cadence that works best for you guys. And ultimately the goal there, getting to the point where it's as easy as checking your email or searching directions on Google Maps. So, you know, it seems maybe like a lot of data at first, but, you know, once you're up and running, it's really just kind of your day-to-day tool, and over your morning cup of coffee, being able to tee up a report and be on your way.
And just to follow up to that, Brian, with the partnership fee, there we could have up to three licenses. Is that correct? Or 3 users, if that's the right term?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay. So in my mind, and not to speak for others, but obviously Joyce and I, but then as Scott alluded, we have a GIS specialist, Dakota Dorn, who might be, you know, the third person that would be the best to be that third user and license.
Yeah, that was going to be my kind of follow-up question to Joyce's question of, like, what is the interface like? Is it sort of a GIS type setup, or could Joyce just like enter a street address in and pull it that way?
Yeah, so it's a web-based application. It's just a login, so there's no software to download or anything like that. It lives in the cloud, and it does have a Google Maps interface. So it's very common across, you know, using Google Maps like you would any data search directions. But, you know, from the standpoint of a GIS, it does have a lot of the functionality of reporting, but specific to Buxton data, and allowing you to, you know, import real estate sites, shape files, things like that, but also create things in the platform, you know, radius rings, drive times, looking at cities, zip codes, things like that. And then all the reporting lives in the platform as well. So you have the ability to kind of go back and download those reports, or, you know, create new reports on command. And there's no quota or limit on the number of reports you can create. So, you know, if, you know, Joyce ran 20 reports in a month, you know, we wouldn't be coming back to her saying, okay, you hit your quota, now you owe us this money. It is unlimited, and there's no kind of nickel and diming throughout the year on that.
Okay, so then on the geofencing, that's something that you guys have already done on the back end. It's not something, again, to kind of the GIS specialist question, it's already baked into the system.
Yeah, so everything from kind of a retail brand perspective is free geofenced for you, but as I did with that Orchard Point Shopping Center, you do have the ability to create a custom geofence if you wanted to. So you have both options at your disposal. And, you know, just to add more context to that, when you do create custom geofences, a lot of our economic development clients that are looking at, you know, downtown districts or, you know, different points of interest that might not be a retail brand location, and they want to gain insights on those visitors, that's exactly kind of what the application of creating a custom geofence is geared towards. So you have the flexibility to do so there as well.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Any other questions?
if members don't have questions, I just have kind of a summary here of why kind of bring forward this request at this point in time. And my conversations with Buxton probably go back to, I think, Brian went back in the archives. There was a guy by the name of Brandon Norrell who's still with Buxton that I had some conversations with, I think in 2010 or 11 or something like that. And, our developments or geographic areas, weren't far enough along at that time, so it probably didn't make sense to engage in a partnership at that time. But it seems like the timing is right with where we're at with Uptown. That Terra Vista's rapidly developing. We've got good multifamily growth in Uptown itself. We've got some of the other infrastructure coming that'll open up the north end of Uptown with the Holmes property and Bobberschmidt and Osborne. So in that corridor, it seems like the timing is really good to start to look at doing something like this. Same situation up in North Fish Hatchery Road, with the development and the infill that we've got going up there. We're adding a lot of households, multifamily households, and a lot of good purchasing power and income levels up there. So we're strengthening the trade ring demographics up there to an older section of Fitchburg, but we're kind of transforming that trade ring. So the timing, I think, is good there as well. And then with Huntley having the property under contract with the quarry site across from Super Target, it seems like in 3 of our kind of strategic geographic north-south corridors, we're aligned from a timing standpoint. One of the challenges for us with the economic development budget and that the elected officials have with the city budget is, of course, we're living under levy limits here. So to come up with $35,000 is a significant amount of money as far as a budget request and ask. So that's where we're getting creative here with in talking to our finance director, Misty Dodge, and our city administrator, Chad Brecklin, is to kind of break it down. So how we would kind of allocate the dollars to come up with the $35,000 would be utilizing TID number 13, which is in Uptown, TID number 10, which is in the North Fish Hatchery Road corridor, and then we would tap into some of our CETA dollars that are the undesignated dollars there. So that way, if we want to run reports that are citywide or outside of TID 10 or TID 13, we're covered to kind of run those reports from a finance department perspective and everything. So that's how we kind of break it down, and kind of what I've talked about with Misty and with Chad on how to approach, this type of expense and investment and everything, just for the elected officials as you kind of go through the budget process there, so you have that perspective. But I think it could be really helpful. One of the other conversations that I want to have with a specific user is I'd like to see our pick and save, at Hatchery Hill transformed into a metro market. And I think some of the data and insight from here would help me have a more informed conversation with the Kroger brand folks to see, what would it take, and what are the trade ring demographics up there right now to look at working with Kroger to see if they could reinvest in that property to upgrade it to a metro market. Over time, the last 3 to 5 years, I've been having conversations with the actual store manager. Ironically, the one guy that was kind of helping to start that conversation with me got relocated to Shorewood Hills, and that one did become a metro market out there. But I think with what we have going on in North Fish Hatchery Road and the infill development and the population and purchasing power that we're adding, I think the timing might be good to have this kind of data to engage in that conversation, to look at kind of strengthening that retail center and that store up there, because it's 20 plus years old, now. And as we look to North Fish Hatchery Road, we want to reinvest, revitalize, and kind of strengthen that whole corridor that developed when Fitchburg was really still a town to the north up there. So that's just kind of some of the background and rationale why at this point in time to bring forward this request. Although, as I pointed out to Brian and Lily, if we do make this investment and look at this kind of partnership, it's got to result in something, too. It's got to have eventually some tangible results. Although I also am realistic to know that it's not like you don't get instant results. It's kind of building those relationships and having that conversation with the data, and it may not result in something immediately, in 6 months or something, but maybe it gets us on the radar screen in like 2 years, especially like in the Uptown neighborhood where we show them what's there today, and then we kind of continue to add to that as there's continued build out, in that neighborhood. So we're on their radar screen. So once we reach maybe that, we might have the customer profile now, but once we reach that critical mass with the number of households, then maybe that particular retailer, restaurant we're on their radar screen, to do something.
So Mike, are you talking about taking the funding out each year that the TID is open?
We may look to do it we're probably going to have to do it a couple of years, there, because like I said, it's relationship building, over time. But we've got the TIDs in place as a tool right now. And hopefully then we're generating new development and valuation that's generating the increment to pay for this investment, and expense. Because as Misty and I always talk about, I have to be careful that I don't write checks that I can't cash there through the TID districts.
All right. Were there any further questions, comments, discussion on this item?
I just want to thank Brian and Lily for getting up early and for the presentation. And Brian, if we could get a copy of your presentation to share with the group today, like a PDF version, if you could send that to Joyce and I, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. And thank you all to the CETA members here today for having us on this morning.
Yeah, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Brian and Lily. Okay. Item number 10 is hotel room tax report considerations. I believe we had our Q2 at the last meeting, and we're still in Q3, so I'm assuming we don't have an update.
Yes.
Unless you have something.
The only thing I will mention is working with our tourism partner, the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor Business Bureau. One of the expenses that you'll probably see working with Joyce and I working with them is it's time to really what would I say, get new banners. Our banners are, 7 years old? I think we've gotten a great return on investment on those banners, but we need to get some new ones, refresh them, and then add to it. We also changed the banner brackets up on North Fish Hatchery Road, whereas before we had double brackets down the middle of the thoroughfare there, where the light poles now are on both sides of the road with kind of single brackets there. And they're going to be a different size. So we're working with Angela right now, our partner at the Fitchburg Chamber, to kind of determine what would those new banners look like, and then would we have two different sets, one for North Fish Hatchery Road and then one for where we've had the existing brackets from a size standpoint. So you may see some conversation and information that we bring back to you on that. That also probably will involve our winter decorations too, as far as maybe getting some new ones or expanding the number of them that we have as we continue to build out some additional areas here in Fitchburg. So just wanted to give you an update on that it's probably time to look at doing those things. And as part of our tourism partnership agreement with the Chamber and Visitor Bureau, they take the lead on that. But we'll report back to you as we get more information. And then Joyce is going to be ordering and updating inventory in our retail department as far as bags, pens, maybe mugs, I think, and she's got a couple of other things on the wish list there, but we're in need of having some additional promo items in our inventory.
All right. I'll let you just keep going with your economic development director
Sure.
update.
Okay. A couple of great events. This week we had the grand opening and ribbon cutting at Shine, the previously Phoenix facility there in Uptown Fitchburg. They moved into their new headquarters building and facility over there during COVID, and we really couldn't celebrate with them. So it was a great event and a great company and a great community partner. They're already engaged in being active and involved in the community with the bike rides and the Burby Derby and all kinds of good stuff. So we're excited to have them here, and I think we're going to see future growth there at that location for them. Last night we had the ribbon cutting for Revive Chiropractic. That's on Fish Hatchery Road in the Terrace Point building. It's on the southern end of the mixed-use building, so it's good to see that space. There's also a Farmers Insurance in that building that's already located there as well. Next week, Thursday, is the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor Business Bureau After Hours. That kicks off at 4 o'clock, and that's going to be at Atomic Koi. And then next week is the WIDA with an H, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Association Conference on September 28th and 29th. So we'll be participating in that from a housing, an affordable housing perspective. A lot of good sessions and lineup that they have on the agenda for that one. We're getting closer to October 31st and the town of Madison becoming part of Fitchburg in the Southdale neighborhood and up on North Fish Hatchery Road. So this evening we have the Fun in the Park. There have been monthly events out at the Southdale Park at 200 Deer Valley Road. So tonight all departments are going to be represented there from 4:30 to 6:30. So if anybody would like to join us, there's going to be free food from JD's food truck. You could tour a fire truck, dump truck, ambulance, and more. DJ, activities and books for kids, temporary tattoos, community resources, and fun. So feel free to come out and help us welcome the town of Madison residents that are our future Fitchburg residents on November 1st there. Then for development updates, one last thing on the town of Madison. At the Plan Commission meeting on Tuesday night was the proposed zoning for those parcels in the town of Madison that currently fall under Dane County zoning. So there was a public hearing, and then that will also be on the October Plan Commission agenda for action by the Plan Commission, and then that will go to council. So our city planner, Deanna Schmidt's really done a lot of work with her team, Zach and Brad, on getting that information prepared as we prepare for that transition. With development projects, we've got Promega Corporation working on relocating their greenhouses that they used to have where the Fahey Glen extension happened. So they're going to do that just east here on Lacey Road, north of Lacey Road, past just east of Fahey Glen over there. So you'll see some greenhouses on that parcel up to the north. There were a couple of final plats for some new townhome inventory. That'll be coming in Terra Vesa, which is a popular product here in Fitchburg as far as helping people to get into ownership. So I think we're going to see another 20 kind of townhome units there and 2 sets of 10, which will be nice. Little John's was back on the agenda just to re-up their ADR for the former A1 furniture building there along Verona Road. And then Encompass Health is they broke ground here south of Nobel Drive in the Fitchburg Tech Campus. They were originally going to start with 40 beds. That's the physical rehabilitation hospital. And they're already coming back to re-up their ADR and increase that to 56 beds. The full project can go up to 80 beds and 80,000 square feet, but they're already seeing a need for greater capacity and physical rehabilitation beds there. And then Irish Fields, which is the multifamily component of the Highfield Reserve, the next phase in the Fahey development over here south of the Fitchburg Tech Campus. I got their early start permit, so we're going to start to see that come forward. And then we're selling when we extended Oshala Drive up on North Fish Hatchery Road and put the signalized intersection there right where UW Credit Union is, there's a remnant parcel to the north of Oshala Drive that we're going to be selling to UW Credit Union because it's not a developable parcel, and they're the logical user of that property. So we're in the process of selling that for at the cost that we had to acquire that property and all fees associated with it, and they're definitely interested in acquiring that parcel from us. And then Royal Capital, which is the developer that's been working on the Fawside property, the clean fill site between Highway 14 and MM. They did not submit on Tuesday of this week. They were looking to submit to be on the October Plan Commission, but they're still working out some of the details with the adjoining property owner on some of the details related to their preliminary and then ultimately their final plat. So it sounds like they need a little bit more time on that front. And then on the housing standpoint or topic, at the last Housing Advisory Committee meeting, we talked about in anticipation of some more of the when we close TID 4 next year, the big TID here, that's going to generate probably another $5 million in resources in our TID for housing funds. So we already started the conversation with that group of what would be some of the uses of those dollars, specifically as identified in our housing plan to help encourage revitalization and reinvestment in some of that older multifamily housing stock that we have in Fitchburg, up in North Fish Hatchery Road, the west side, and Belmar. So we're just starting to have conversations and think about that. One need in particular is maybe, is there a way that we could incent if a property owner is doing some renovations already, incent them to install a fire safety sprinkler system? And, could some of those funds be used for that purpose? So we had our fire chief at the last Housing Advisory Committee meeting just talking about the importance of that and how that can be done. So that might be something that you hear from us. And then today, we're meeting with our Senior Center Director, Jill McCone. There's this program called Hotels to Home that's helping people that are currently either homeless or, between housing, get into apartments and housing and everything. But our senior center's experience, it's generating some additional requests for case management and everything. So we're just meeting with Jill today to get a better understanding of kind of what those requests for service and case management and assistance are. And we may have her come to the next Housing Advisory Committee meeting as well. And then Joyce and I, we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I'm probably going to have her send this group a copy of some TIF developer agreements. One conversation we'd like to have with CETA, with the Housing Advisory Committee, and ultimately with the City Council and the elected officials are in Shorewood Hills. John Flad worked with the Village of Shorewood Hills on a model where he did some market rate developments out there. You might see the boulevard along University Avenue and then the Lodge, which are the apartments across from their Target over there on University Ave. But they're market rate buildings, but what he did through some TIF assistance with Shorewood Hills is 10% of the units are affordable units, where it's just incorporated into a market rate building. So it's not designated as, here's the affordable building. They're just kind of seamlessly incorporated, and they're, I think, at about 60% of Dane County median income. So we're going to share the developer agreements with you so you can kind of see how the details of that agreement worked with the Village of Shorewood Hills, and to maybe start a conversation in this community to say, is that a model that we want to look towards in different areas to increase a new supply of affordable housing that is outside of a specifically designated affordable building, there. And when we first went and toured, and the mayor went, and Joyce and I went, and our city planner at that time, Sonia, went, and we toured those buildings, and they shared with us that model. We got us thinking, boy, that might be a really healthy way to increase the supply of affordable housing, in Fitchburg. So watch for that as far as some homework and reading material, and then maybe we can put that on a future agenda to get your perspective and insight on what you think about that idea going forward. And I think that covers all of my updates. Did you have anything, Joyce? Otherwise, I asked Mark to give us a B-cycle update, too.
Go ahead, Joyce.
I just wanted to report out that we have been extremely busy with site search requests. Just got another one yesterday. So we'll give you some reports as things move forward, but it's consumed a lot of our time. I just think the Buxton information could be useful in some of having some prepared reports that we can have readily available versus us going out to do a lot of data collection and research that we've been doing lately. I just want to put it out there that our next scheduled meeting is October 27th. We'll be looking to send out some dates for our joint November-December meeting. So if you could please let me know as soon as we figure out when those dates are. We'd appreciate it. And we have Quarry Ridge ribbon cutting coming up. Do you know what date that is?
I don't remember that one.
I want to say it's like October 6th or 5th. I sent out a meeting appointment. So cool project if you guys can join us.
October 6th.
October 6th?
Yep.
Sorry.
And then I'll just piggyback on Joyce. Two things. One is the Quick Trip on Sain Road is opening I think sometime late next week, but the official grand opening and ribbon cutting is on October 5th. And the ribbon cutting, I think, is at 10 o'clock, so hopefully you can join us for that. I know the neighborhood is looking forward to that.
If you can get there.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's a little road construction on Sayin.
I don't know, it says road closed, I can't go south or north.
You can't.
I think you can access it off of East Sherrill Parkway there. If you come in off of Lacey and
I
East
have a
Sherrill.
way to get to and from work, and I get off my path, I might be lost.
And then I just wanted to, on the responses to the request for proposals for site selection, just compliment Joyce. There's one in particular that, requested a lot of information and then had additional follow-up information. So for a number of days, she was putting the whole package together to get it submitted before the deadline. But I think that project in particular is an example of, from the last presentation that we had from the site selection gentleman, Colvin Pfeiffer, that he said, you want to continue to kind of clear the hurdle and get to the next level there. And I think now this is at least two, if not the third level that we've cleared, that we're still in the mix. Not to say that we'll land the project, but we're still viable, at this point in time. So it shows the value of that work. Sometimes it doesn't result in anything, but it takes a significant amount of time. But you want to at least be in the game, because you never know when we might land the one that is the company of that particular RFP. So thanks to Joyce for all her hard work and assistance in that.
Mark, if you had your...
Yes, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is that we are all set to put phase one of the B-Cycle or bike sharing program up and running in Fitchburg. The bad news is Trek still has supply chain problems. So most likely, the 6 sites we've chosen to put this in, and I'll remind you of those in a minute, will probably be going in the spring. I'm not 100% sure, but they take these stations out the end of around Halloween, or weather depending, of course. They put them back in around the mid-March, the 1st of April, so they're in for 7 months of the year. But I'm not so certain that Trek's even going to have the supplies by mid-October for phase one. So we're committed to phase one. The supplies are on order. There will be 50 bikes. They're going to go in business sites around the city and in McKee Farms Park, over here at Agora, out at Terra Vesa that way, west over towards Badger State Trail. And then the other two, there's a senior center that Lane Manning works with that bought into it. And
the Limerick.
Yeah, the Limerick. And then the last one is going to be at Cahill, Maine. So we've covered the things that CETA had asked us to do. Phase two of this project is a TAP grant that we got from the state. It hasn't been officially announced, but we have a sense we're going to get that TAP grant, which will bring another 50-plus bikes to Fitchburg over a 2 to 3 year period. Trek is working now to secure funding for that because it's an 80-20 grant. 80% state fed money, 20% we'll raise to get it done. And so this is all on track, and where we're going to hit that second phase of bicycles is going to be in what I'm calling some of our underserved areas, the neighborhood hub. Isn't even up yet, so it doesn't make any sense to go there. We've talked to Michael Johnson about McKenzie Training Center, Boys and Girls Club. So places like that. And then the one we want to figure out is what can we do with Southdale? Is how does it fit into coming forward in the future? So this is a moving target for phase two, but I think we've got half of them identified. We will get this done. And I thank CETA's support initially to help seed this. The Chamber has seeded this too. I think the Chamber will consider some ongoing support down the road. I think it all depends on what happens to our motels and the tourist money they get back. So any questions about B-Cycle?
Not a question, but last time I talked to the developer of the Limerick, they were going to offer their residents free subscriptions to B-Cycle, and I thought that was a good plan.
Right. Well, and he's doing that I think he's got something going on in Monona too, and they're doing that there. The other one we'd like to offer down the road, we're going to talk to Trek about, and I don't mind sharing this because it came from the bike committee, is in Madison, they're giving some free passes to go to the library. So if we have something up at the hub, you can get to our library right over here without having to ride your bike on Fish Hatchery Road. I mean, you can get there in a safe way. So we're hoping to connect the network. That's the goal. Ultimately, Oregon wants to be connected. So there's a lot going on, but I think we finally, once we got past the initial hurdles, this is going to flow very well. And we have a city person who's a liaison with Trek, and we happen to have 2 B-cycle reps who live in our city. So it's the one I didn't talk about was up in your area, up at Stoner Prairie. They've raised Stoner Prairie Park. They've raised the question of do we put them up there too, and maybe down the road as we get forward, it's on the list.
Good. I'd like to encourage that. Stoner
It's
Prairie.
on. We didn't lose it. It's on the list. But we also first wanted to focus on the underserved areas, and the people that the TAP grant really like that. The hub, the training center for McKinsey. Kids can ride those bikes there 7 months of the year and park them there and then come back. So, and we think we got the network connected. So,
Good.
Is that, Mike, what you wanted me to share? Is that good enough? Any other questions? If you have any, just shoot me an email. Thank you.
Dan, if we had a venture debt update, or are we still kind of in a holding pattern?
They bailed.
Oh, okay.
They did not like the terms, so they're going to do it somewhere else.
Okay. All right, if there are no other updates, item number 12 is announcements. I don't believe we have any others. I think you've covered them all in your update. Then item number 13 is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.